The alarm screamed through the medical bay with a pitch that made Maya's teeth ache. Red emergency lights casting everything in hellish shadows as she sprinted down the corridor of the orbital station. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but when you're the only pediatric nurse on a station housing 300 humans and twice as many alien delegates, off-duty is a theoretical concept at best. The metal grating beneath her feet rattled with each footfall, and she could feel the station's artificial gravity struggling to compensate for whatever crisis was unfolding in the xenobiology wing. "Nurse Chen, we need you in Trauma Bay 7, now." The voice crackled through her comm unit, Dr. Voss's usual composure replaced by something that sounded uncomfortably close to panic. In the 3 years Maya had worked alongside him, she'd seen the man deliver a human baby during a meteor strike, perform surgery while the station lost oxygen to 2 entire sections, and crack jokes while removing a parasitic organism from a Kellian ambassador's brainstem. If he was panicking, something had gone catastrophically wrong. She burst through the doors to find controlled chaos. 5 doctors crowded around a medical pod, their faces grim behind protective visors. The patient wasn't visible through the throng of white coats and the tangle of monitoring equipment, but the readings on the holographic displays told a story that made Maya's stomach drop. Temperature fluctuating wildly between hypothermic and fever hot. 2 hearts no, 3 hearts, all beating at different, irregular rhythms. Blood oxygen levels that shouldn't be compatible with consciousness, let alone life. "What have we got?" Maya pushed through to the pod, her eyes already scanning for the details the doctors might miss in their focus on keeping whatever was in there alive for the next 5 seconds. "Doctor?" Voss looked up, his weathered face gray with exhaustion or fear or both. "Xylophone infant, approximately. 6 hours old. Mother died in childbirth complications we didn't anticipate. The father is demanding we save the child, but every precedent says it's impossible. Xylophone infants don't survive outside the womb without constant biological connection to the mother. The longest anyone's kept one alive post-maternal death is 43 minutes. We're at 38. Maya's breath caught. She'd read about the xylophone everyone in xenomedicine had. They were one of the rarest species in the coalition, their biology so complex and interwoven with their family units that they were practically living ecosystems. The infant in the pod was no bigger than her forearm, its translucent skin revealing the shimmer of organs that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent light. 3 tiny limbs curled against its body, and a 4th, smaller appendage twitched near what might have been a face, though the features were alien enough that Maya had to guess. Beautiful, terrifying. "Dying. The father?" Maya asked, though she was already pulling on gloves, already moving to the pod's control panel to review the failing life support parameters. "In the waiting area. He knows the statistics, Doctor." Morrison, the station's xenobiology chief, sounded defeated. She was a brilliant woman, had written the textbook on cross-species medicine that Maya had studied from, but right now she looked like she wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. "We've tried every standard protocol. Nothing's working. The child's systems are shutting down sequentially. We're losing neural activity in the upper cortex. I'm calling it. Time of death. No." The word came out harder than Maya intended, sharp enough to cut through the resigned murmurs of the medical team. All eyes turned to her, and she felt the weight of their exhaustion, their certainty that this was a battle already lost. But Maya had spent her entire career being told what was impossible, what couldn't be done, which patients were too far gone. She'd built her reputation on being too stubborn to listen. "We're not calling anything yet. There has to be something we're missing. Doctor. Voss shook his head, not unkindly. Maya, I know you hate losing patients, but this isn't about effort or will. This is pure biology. Without the mother's genetic material actively bonding with the infant system, it can't regulate its own functions. We'd need to essentially become a living xylophone mother, and that's impossible. Then we figure out what's possible. Maya was already accessing the station's medical database, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. Somewhere in these thousands of case studies and research papers, there had to be something, some precedent or theory that could buy them time. The infant's vital signs continued their descent on the monitors, each number a countdown to failure. Doctor. Morrison moved closer, her voice dropping. Even if we had a solution, we're talking about uncharted territory. No human has ever attempted to provide life support for a xylophone infant. The biochemical incompatibilities alone could kill both the child and anyone connected to it. So we don't know it won't work. Maya met the doctor's eyes, saw the flicker of something there, not quite hope, but maybe the memory of what hope felt like. I'm not ready to tell that father his child is gone because we were too afraid to try. The words hung in the sterile air of the trauma bay, and Maya could feel the shift in the room's energy. These were good doctors, dedicated people who had chosen to work on the frontier of space medicine precisely because they believed in pushing boundaries. But they were also human, bound by protocols and precedents, trained to recognize when a fight was lost. Maya had never been very good at recognizing that. The database search returned 347 results, none of them promising. Maya's eyes burned as she scrolled through case studies of failed xylophone infant resuscitations, each one a variation on the same tragic theme. Maternal death led inevitably to infant death, usually within the hour. The xylophone biological bond wasn't just emotional or chemical, it was something far more fundamental, a quantum entanglement of life forces that human science barely understood, let alone knew how to replicate. 41 minutes. Dr. Voss's voice cut through her concentration. The infant's bioluminescence was dimming, its translucent skin losing the vibrant shimmer that had made it look almost magical. Now it just looked fragile, a guttering candle in the moment before darkness. Maya's fingers froze over a research paper published 2 years ago by a xylophone scientist named Thelvar. The abstract made her pulse quicken. It theorized that while human biology couldn't replicate the xylophone maternal bond, human neural plasticity might allow for a temporary bridge, a way to fool the infant system into accepting life support from an incompatible species. The paper had been rejected by every major medical journal, dismissed as pseudoscience by the xenobiology community. Here. Maya pulled the paper up on the main display, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. This researcher suggests that if we could create a neural feedback loop between a human caregiver and the infant, we might be able to trick its autonomic systems into functioning. The human brain would essentially learn to regulate the infant's body by receiving constant biofeedback. Dr. Morrison scanned the paper, her frown deepening with each paragraph. This was thoroughly debunked. The peer review process tore it apart. The theoretical neural load alone would cause irreversible brain damage to the human subject. You'd be asking someone to essentially operate 4 hearts, 6 lungs, and a dozen other organs they don't understand while maintaining their own bodily functions. It's suicide. It's a chance. Maya looked down at the infant, watching its chest rise and fall in increasingly erratic patterns. Something in her chest tightened, that familiar feeling she got with every patient she'd ever fought for. She'd been 7 years old when her baby brother died, too young to understand why the doctors couldn't save him, old enough to remember the helplessness that had carved itself into her bones. She'd built her entire life around making sure she never felt that helpless again. And it's more than this baby has right now. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady beep of failing monitors. Dr. Voss exchanged a long look with Dr. Morrison, some unspoken conversation passing between them. Finally, he turned back to Maya, his expression unreadable. Even if we were willing to attempt this, and I'm not saying we are, it would require a volunteer, someone willing to risk permanent neurological damage or death for an uncertain outcome. We can't ask anyone to do that. You're not asking. Maya was already moving toward the pod, her decision made the moment she'd seen the infant's fading light. I'm volunteering. The room erupted. Dr. Morrison's objections overlapped with Dr. Voss's concerns about liability and medical ethics. 2 other doctors chimed in with warnings about the legal ramifications, the career implications, the sheer recklessness of what Maya was proposing. She let the noise wash over her, focused instead on the tiny being struggling for each breath inside the medical pod. We need to notify the father. Dr. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with authority. This is his child. He has a right to know what we're attempting and to consent to experimental treatment. Maya nodded, but she was already calculating the time they'd lose. 43 minutes. They'd passed the longest recorded survival time for a xylophone infant without maternal support. Every second they debated was a second closer to the point of no return. Dr. Voss made the call, his voice professionally calm as he requested the father's presence in the trauma bay. Maya used the waiting time to review Thelvar's methodology, committing every detail to memory. The procedure required a modified neural interface, the kind typically used for remote surgical operations, but reconfigured to allow bidirectional data flow. The human operator would receive sensory input from the infant's body temperature, pain, organ function, and their brain would instinctively attempt to regulate those sensations, sending corrective signals back through the interface. The theory was elegant. The practice was potentially fatal. The doors hissed open, and Maya looked up to see a figure that made her breath catch. The xylophone father stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body covered in the same translucent skin as his child, though his was darker, more crystalline. His features were angular and sharp, beautiful in their alienness, and his eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangular pattern across his face, held a depth of grief that transcended species. I am Kethral. His voice resonated with harmonics that Maya felt in her sternum, a sound like wind chimes made of glass and sorrow. You are trying to save my daughter. Not a question. A statement weighted with desperate hope. Maya stepped forward, acutely aware of how small and inadequate she must seem to this being whose biology she barely comprehended. I want to try something. It's dangerous, and it might not work, but then try. Kethral moved to the pod, one long finger pressing against the transparent surface above his daughter's form. Where he touched, the infant's bioluminescence flickered brighter for just a moment, responding to her father's presence. Please. The neural interface looked deceptively simple, a silver circlet that would rest against Maya's temples, connected by fiber optic cables to a matching device that would be placed on the infant's body. Dr. Voss's hands shook slightly as he calibrated the Duffet equipment, running diagnostic after diagnostic as if he could somehow make the procedure less insane through sheer technical precision. Maya sat on the edge of a medical chair they'd pulled beside the infant's pod, watching Kethral hover nearby, his 3 eyes never leaving his daughter's failing form. The initial connection will be disorienting. Dr. Morrison's voice was tight with professional concern, barely masking personal worry. Maya had worked with her long enough to know that beneath the clinical exterior, Morrison cared deeply about her staff. Your brain will receive sensory data it has no framework for processing. Most test subjects in the simulations experienced immediate nausea. Some lost consciousness. If at any point the neural load becomes too much, we're pulling you out immediately. Maya nodded. Though they both knew that once she was connected, once the infant's systems began responding to her neural input, disconnecting might kill them both. The xylophone, biological bond didn't allow for half measures. It was all or nothing, life or death, and Maya had never been good at accepting death as an answer. "There's something you should know." Kethral's voice made them all turn. He stood with his hands pressed together in what might have been a gesture of prayer or desperation. In our culture, when a mother dies in childbirth, if anyone attempts to sustain the infant through artificial means and fails, they are considered to have stolen the child's peaceful death. They carry the weight of that theft forever. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of implication spreading through the medical bay. Maya met Kethral's crystalline gaze, seeing the layers of meaning there. He was warning her, giving her one last chance to walk away from a burden that might follow her across the galaxy. "And if I succeed?" Maya asked quietly. Something that might have been a smile crossed Kethral's angular features. "Then you will have given my percent, daughter, the most precious gift in the universe, a chance to choose her own death. Many years from now, after a life fully lived." Maya felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto her shoulders, heavier than any piece of medical equipment. She thought about her brother again, about the doctors who had tried and failed to save him, about the debt she owed to every small life that hung in the balance. Some people became doctors or nurses because they loved medicine. Maya had joined because she couldn't bear the alternative. "Let's do this." She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes as Dr. Voss approached with the neural interface. The metal was cool against her temples, the fit snug enough to make her aware of her own pulse. She could hear the whisper of the medical team moving around her, prepping the infant's interface, making final adjustments to the monitoring systems that would track both their vital signs. Neural pathways mapped. Dr. Voss's voice seemed to come from far away. Establishing baseline readings. "Maya, I need you to stay calm. Keep your breathing steady. Your autonomic nervous system is about to get very confused." She felt the first pulse of connection like a wave of static across her brain, and then the world inverted. Suddenly she was aware of her body in the chair and something else, something small and failing and desperate. 3 hearts hammered against ribs she didn't have, each one beating to a different discordant rhythm. 6 lungs tried to draw breath through pathways that felt twisted and blocked. Her skin, no, the infant's skin burned with fever and ice simultaneously, temperature fluctuating wildly as failing regulatory systems misfired. Maya gasped, her own heart stuttering in confusion. The sensory overload was beyond anything she'd imagined. It wasn't like operating a remote drone or controlling a prosthetic limb. This was feeling every sensation, every malfunction, every moment of the infant's struggle, as if it were happening to her own body. The pain was exquisite and terrible, a symphony of biological catastrophe that threatened to pull her consciousness apart. Maya, your neural activity is spiking dangerously. Doctor. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. We need to consider disconnection. No, the word came out strangled. Maya forced herself to focus, to separate her awareness from the overwhelming tide of alien sensation. She was a nurse. She'd spent years learning to stay calm in crisis, to think clearly when everything was falling apart. She could do this. She had to do this. She imagined her consciousness as a hand reaching through the neural interface, trying to grasp the failing systems and steady them. The three hearts, first she focused on their rhythms, feeling the irregular beats. In her own chest, her single human heart maintained its steady pace. She tried to project that steadiness across the connection, imagining each of the infant's hearts synchronizing, finding a common rhythm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, impossibly, she felt one of the hearts skip a beat and fall into time with her own. Then another. The third took longer, its rhythm stubborn and chaotic, but gradually it too began to stabilize. On the monitors, alarms started to silence as the infant's cardiovascular system found a sustainable pattern. It's working. Dr. Voss's voice held a note of wonder and fear. The infant's heart rates are stabilizing. Neural activity in the cortex is increasing. Maya, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But the hearts were just the beginning. Maya could feel the infant's lungs struggling, filling with fluid that shouldn't be there, each breath a battle. She'd never thought about how she breathed before it just happened, an unconscious process governed by the ancient parts of her brain. Now she had to make it conscious, had to teach 6 alien lungs how to function through nothing but will and neural feedback. She focused on the sensation of breathing, the rise and fall of her own chest, the cool air filling her lungs. She pushed that awareness through the interface, trying to guide the infant's respiratory system, clear the fluid, expand the airways, draw breath, release. Again. The infant's body responded slowly, fighting her at first, then gradually accepting the guidance. Maya felt the moment when the lungs cleared, when breath came easier. On the monitors, oxygen levels began to climb. The medical team moved around her and practiced choreography, adjusting medications, fine-tuning the life support systems, but Maya barely noticed them. Her entire world had narrowed to 2 heartbeats, her own and the infant's 3, and the desperate, beautiful struggle to keep them all going. Time became meaningless in the space between 2 minds. Maya couldn't tell if she'd been connected for minutes or hours. Her sense of self stretched thin across the neural bridge. Every system she stabilized revealed 2 more, teetering on the edge of failure. The infant's digestive tract kept trying to process nutrients it couldn't absorb. Her lymphatic system, or what passed for one in xylophone biology, was collapsing, unable to filter the toxins building up in her bloodstream. Maya felt each malfunction as a wrongness in her own body, a persistent ache that demanded attention she couldn't spare. Core temperature dropping again. Doctor, Voss's voice penetrated the fog of concentration. Down to 32 degrees Celsius. We're risking hypothermic shock. Maya tried to respond but couldn't form words. Speaking required disconnecting from the infant's sensations, and she couldn't afford that fragmentation. Instead, she focused on warmth, remembering summer afternoons in her grandmother's garden, the weight of sunshine on her skin. She pushed that memory through the neural link, willing the infant's body to remember what warmth felt like, to generate heat instead of losing it. The infant stirred for the passless, first time since Maya had connected. It was the smallest movement, one translucent limb uncurling slightly, but it sent a jolt of something that might have been joy or pain or both through the neural interface. Maya felt the infant's consciousness brush against hers, not thoughts exactly, but pure sensation and emotion, confusion, fear, hunger, loss, overwhelming, crushing loss. The grief hit Maya like a physical blow, and she realized she was feeling the infant's awareness of her mother's absence. Xylophone bonding wasn't just biological, it was emotional, psychological, spiritual. This tiny being knew, on some fundamental level, that the connection she'd been born expecting was gone forever, that her mother's voice would never harmonize with hers, that the safety she'd known in the womb had ended in violence and absence. Maya's own tears surprised her, hot against her cheeks in the cool air of the medical bay. She thought about her brother again, about how he'd looked so peaceful, in her mother's arms even as the life drained from him, about the years of wondering if he'd known he was dying, if he'd been afraid. She'd never let herself imagine his fear before. Now, connected to this infant's raw terror and grief, she couldn't think of anything else. "I've got you," Maya whispered the words, not sure if they were for the infant or for her brother's memory or for herself. "I've got you. You're not alone." The infant's emotional turbulence didn't calm, but something shifted. Maya felt a tentative reaching through the neural bridge, consciousness seeking connection. The infant was trying to bond with her, trying to find in Maya's human mind the maternal anchor she'd been born expecting. It should have been impossible. Their biologies were too different, their neural structures incompatible. But desperation and need transcended biology, and Maya felt her mind opening to accept the connection. "Maya, your neural patterns are changing." Dr. Morrison's voice carried a sharp edge of alarm. "You're developing synchronized activity with the infant's brain. This wasn't in the simulations. We don't know what this could do to your long-term cognitive function." Maya heard the words, but they seemed distant, irrelevant. The infant needed her. That was all that mattered. She let the bond deepen, let her consciousness intertwine with the small, frightened mind on the other end of the neural bridge. She showed the infant memories her grandmother's garden, the sound of rain on windows, the taste of chocolate, the feeling of being held. Human experiences that the infant couldn't fully process, but which carried the emotional weight of safety, of love, of not being alone. In return, she received flashes of xylophone sensation. The infant's memories of the womb were different from anything human she'd been conscious there, aware, listening to harmonics that were part music and part language. Her mother's voice had been a constant presence, singing the histories of their people, teaching even before birth. The infant shared a name with Maya, though it wasn't a word but a frequency, a resonance that translated roughly to small light in dark water. "Hello, small light." Maya breathed the words like a prayer. "I'm Maya. I'm going to keep you alive." Kethral made a sound that was half sob, half song. Maya had forgotten he was there, forgotten anyone existed outside the neural bubble she and the infant had created. She forced her eyes open, the physical world reasserting itself with brutal clarity. The xylophone father stood with his hands pressed against the pod's surface, his 3 eyes wide and streaming with luminescent tears. "You spoke her true name." Kethral's voice resonated with harmonics Maya could now almost understand, the neural bridge having sensitized her to xylophone communication frequencies. "You heard her. How is this possible?" Dr. Voss and Dr. Morrison exchanged glances, and Maya saw her own wonder reflected in their faces. The monitors showed something that shouldn't exist: two completely different nervous systems, operating in partial synchronization, sharing information across a bridge that evolution had never designed. The bond is stabilizing. Dr. Voss studied the readouts with the intensity of a man watching a miracle occur in real time. All of the infant's vital signs are within acceptable ranges. Heart rate synchronized and steady, respiratory function normal, neural activity strong and consistent, temperature holding at 37.2 degrees. Maya, you did it. You actually did it. But Maya could feel the truth beneath the triumph. The infant was stable, yes, but only because Maya was holding her there through sheer force of will and neural connection. The moment Maya disconnected, all those carefully regulated systems would fall back into chaos. The infant's body still didn't know how to sustain itself. Maya had become a temporary mother, yes, but temporary wasn't enough. How long can I stay connected? Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Dr. Morrison's expression shuddered. In theory? The neural interface can maintain connection indefinitely. In practice, the human brain needs rest, needs to disconnect from constant sensory input to process and consolidate memories. You'll need to sleep, Maya. And when you do, unless the infant has learned to regulate her own systems, she dies. Maya finished the sentence, feeling the weight of it settle into her bones. She'd bought small light time, maybe hours, maybe days, but not a life. Not yet. Kethral moved closer, his towering form casting shadows across the medical equipment. Among my people, when a bond mother dies, sometimes an aunt or sister will attempt to sustain the infant until another mother can be found, but even that is temporary. Eventually, the infant must learn independence, must develop the ability to self-regulate. It takes weeks, sometimes months. Months. Maya felt the enormity of it crash over her. Months connected to another consciousness, months of maintaining someone else's bodily functions while trying to preserve her own sanity. It was impossible. It was insane. It was the only chance Small Light had. The first 72 hours blurred into a waking dream punctuated by brief moments of clarity. Maya remained connected to Small Light, her world divided between her own body, anchored in the medical chair, and the infant systems that demanded constant attention. The medical team established shifts around her, doctors and nurses rotating through to monitor both their patients, to adjust medications and nutrient feeds, to call out warnings when Maya's own vital signs started to deteriorate from exhaustion. Sleep became a negotiation between necessity and terror. Dr. Morrison rigged a modified sedation protocol that would keep Maya's autonomic nervous system active even while her conscious mind rested, theoretically allowing her to maintain the neural bridge while sleeping. Theoretically. The first time they tried it, Maya lasted 20 minutes before Small Light's distress woke her with a jolt that nearly stopped her heart. The infant could feel when Maya's consciousness retreated, and her panic destabilized everything. You need rest. Kethral's voice had become a familiar presence in the medical bay. He never left, maintaining a vigil beside his daughter's pod that reminded Maya of pictures she'd seen of ancient religious devotions. If you burn out, Small Light loses her only anchor. I know. Maya's own voice sounded distant, worn thin by exhaustion. I'm trying. She just can't feel me leave. Every time my awareness fades, she thinks I'm her mother dying all over again. The words hurt to say, hurt worse because they were true. Through the neural bridge, Maya experienced Small Light's terror as her own, felt the way the infant's mind conflated Maya's presence with the maternal bond she'd lost. Maya had become a surrogate in ways that went deeper than biology, and the responsibility of it was crushing. Dr. Voss brought food that Maya couldn't taste, her sensory integration so scrambled that she couldn't tell if the sandwich in her hand was turkey or cardboard. Small Light's dietary needs kept intruding on her own hunger signals. The infant required a complex formula of synthesized nutrients every 2 hours, and Maya felt each feeding as if she were the one consuming the metallic-tasting liquid. We need to talk about the long-term plan. Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair beside Maya, her tablet displaying graphs and projections that Maya's tired eyes couldn't quite focus on. You've kept Small Light stable for 3 days. That's remarkable. But you're deteriorating, Maya. Your neural patterns are showing signs of fragmentation. Your body is losing muscle mass because you're spending so much energy regulating 2 organisms. At this rate, you have maybe 2 weeks before we're dealing with permanent cognitive damage or complete physical collapse. Then we have 2 weeks to teach Small Light how to self-regulate. Maya forced her attention onto the graphs, seeing the slow downward trend of her own health metrics. Morrison was right, of course. Maya could feel it in the increasing effort it took to maintain the neural bridge, in the way her thoughts kept skipping like a scratched recording. That's never been done before. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. Xylophone infants learn independence through gradual separation from their mothers over months, sometimes a year. You're talking about compressing that process into days. The infant's neurology might not be capable of developing that quickly. Then we make it capable. Maya looked at Kethral, seeing the desperate hope in his crystalline eyes. You said sometimes an aunt or sister helps sustain an infant temporarily. How does that work? How does the infant eventually survive on their own? Kethral's form seemed to shimmer with emotion. The bond mother maintains connection while encouraging the infant to practice small moments of independence. A minute of self-regulation, then 2, then 5. Each success is reinforced with harmonics, with emotional praise. The infant learns that independence is safe, that the bond mother will return. It is a dance of connection and release, repeated thousands of times until the infant's confidence grows stronger than her fear. A dance of connection and release. Maya turned the phrase over in her mind, feeling Small Light's consciousness pressed against hers, seeking constant reassurance. The infant had no confidence, no experience with anything except loss and the desperate clinging to Maya's presence. Teaching her to let go would require first teaching her to trust. We start small. Maya's decision crystallized even as she spoke. 5 seconds of gentle disconnection. I'll warn her it's coming. Stay close enough that she can feel I haven't abandoned her, then reconnect. We do it 100 times a day if we have to. Dr. Voss frowned. Each disconnection risks destabilizing her systems. If her heart rates desynchronize or her breathing fails in those 5 seconds, then I reconnect immediately. Maya met his gaze, seeing the same conflict she felt reflected there. Every option was dangerous. Every choice carried the weight of a life hanging in the balance. But if we don't try, she dies when I collapse. At least this way we're working toward something. The logic was sound, but Maya could feel the resistance in her own mind. Over the past 3 days she'd gotten used to Small Light's presence, to the constant hum of shared consciousness. The thought of intentionally creating distance, even for seconds, felt like betrayal. The infant trusted her. How could Maya teach her that sometimes the people you trust leave? But they did leave. Her brother had left, whether he wanted to or not. Her grandmother, who'd raised her through the chaos of her parents' divorce, had left. Everyone left eventually. The only question was whether you were strong enough to survive their absence. "I'll help." Kethral moved closer, his long fingers hovering near the pod's surface. "My voice carries frequencies that soothe Xylophone young. I cannot bond with small light the way her mother could, the way you have, but I can sing the harmonics of safety. Perhaps that will help her feel less alone during the disconnections." Maya felt something loosen in her chest, gratitude mixing with relief. She'd been carrying this burden alone, but she didn't have to. Kethral was Small Light's father, and while Xylophone biology might not allow for paternal bonding the way it did maternal, love transcended the limitations of biochemistry. "Okay." Maya took a deep breath, feeling it echo through Small Light's 6 lungs. "Let's try. Small Light, can you hear me?" Through the neural bridge, she felt the infant's attention focus. Small Light didn't understand language yet, but she recognized the emotional context of Maya's thoughts, the shift in intention. "I need to step back for just a moment. Your father is here. I'm not leaving. I'm just teaching you that you're strong enough to breathe on your own. 5 seconds. You can do this." She felt Small Light's immediate panic, the surge of biochemical distress that threatened to cascade into system failure. But before Maya could reconnect, Kethral began to sing. The sound was unlike anything human vocal cords could produce, layers of harmonic frequencies that resonated through the medical bay, through the pod's structure, directly into Small Light's consciousness. It wasn't words, but it carried meaning, safety, love, presence. Maya let her awareness pull back slightly, maintaining the lightest touch on the neural bridge while giving Small Light space to function independently. 5 seconds. She counted them like heartbeats. 1. Small Light's 3 hearts stuttered, losing synchronization. 2. Respiratory rate spiking. 3. But not failing, not yet. 4. Kethral's song wrapped around his daughter, and Maya felt Small Light's panic begin to ease. 5. Maya flooded back across the bridge, her presence a wave of reassurance. "You did it. You were so strong. You breathed on your own." 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of connection and release, each cycle pushing Small Light a little further toward independence. 5 seconds became 10, then 30, then a full minute. Maya marked each milestone with a fierce pride that surprised her, the kind of joy she imagined mothers felt watching their children take first steps. But each success came with a cost. Maya's body was failing under the constant strain, her weight dropping to dangerous levels despite the high-calorie IV drip Dr. Morrison had insisted on. Her hands trembled when she tried to eat solid food, and her dreams on the rare occasions she managed sleep were fractured, things full of heartbeats that weren't her own. But Small Light was thriving. The infant had grown visibly stronger, her bioluminescence brightening from the dim flicker of those first desperate hours to a steady glow that filled the medical pod with shifting colors. She'd learned to regulate her 3 hearts, to coordinate her 6 lungs, to maintain her own temperature within normal ranges. The triumphs were real, measurable, undeniable, and yet Maya could feel the invisible tether between them. The way Small Light's confidence still depended on knowing Maya was there, just beyond the neural bridge, ready to reconnect at the first sign of distress. "You can't keep this up much longer." Dr. Morrison's daily warnings had become more urgent, tinged with real fear. She'd pulled up Maya's latest brain scans, showing the areas where neural tissue was breaking down from overstimulation. Your hippocampus is showing damage consistent with severe trauma. Your amygdala is hyperactive to the point where I'm worried about permanent anxiety disorders. Maya, you've done something incredible here, but you need to accept that you might not be able to finish it. Maya stared at the scans, at the physical evidence of what the past 2 weeks had cost her. The rational part of her brain, the part that had made it through nursing school, that understood medical ethics and triage, knew Morrison was right. She'd pushed her body and mind past any reasonable limit. The responsible thing would be to acknowledge that she'd bought small light time, that she'd given Kethril weeks with his daughter that the statistics said were impossible, and to disconnect before the damage became irreversible. But Maya had never been particularly good at being responsible when a life was on the line. "How long do I have?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Doctor?" Morrison's expression crumbled slightly, the professional mask slipping to show the woman beneath who'd become a friend over 3 years of working together. "Days, maybe a week. After that, even if we disconnect you, the neural damage might be permanent. You could lose memories, language function, emotional regulation. We're talking about potential brain death, Maya." The words should have terrified her. Instead, Maya felt a strange calm settle over her exhausted mind. She'd always known, on some level, that her work would kill her eventually. Medical professionals on frontier stations had shorter life expectancies than soldiers. They just died slower, worn down by radiation exposure, weird alien pathogens, the accumulated stress of saving lives in impossible conditions. She'd made peace with that risk the day she signed her contract. But this was different. This wasn't dying from random bad luck or occupational hazard. This was choosing to sacrifice herself for a single life, a tiny alien infant who'd had the misfortune to be born at the wrong time to the wrong mother. It felt both more meaningful and more wasteful than Maya could process. "I need to talk to Kethril." Maya's words surprised her, but once spoken, they felt right. This wasn't just her decision anymore. Small Light was his daughter, his family, his future. He deserved to know what his child's survival might cost. They found him in the observation room he'd claimed as his own, a small space adjacent to the medical bay where he could watch Small Light without interfering with the medical team. He decorated it in ways Maya didn't fully understand, crystalline structures arranged in patterns that might have been art or prayer or both, holographic images of what she assumed was his home world, a recording device that played xylophone harmonics on an endless loop. "She's getting stronger." Kethril's voice held cautious hope. "I can see it in the way she moves, the brightness of her light. You have given her a chance at life, Maya Chen." "Maybe." Maya moved to stand beside him, looking through the transparent wall at Small Light's play pod. The infant was awake, her 3 eyes tracking the movement of medical staff, her tiny limbs stretching in ways that suggested growing confidence in her own body. "But I need you to understand something. The doctors say I'm running out of time. If I stay connected much longer, the damage to my brain will be permanent. I could die or end up in a vegetative state." She felt Kethril's attention shift fully to her, the weight of his 3-eyed gaze carrying an intensity that human eyes couldn't match. "And yet you are still here, still connected." "Yes." Maya couldn't quite explain why, even to herself. "I just need to know if it comes to that. If I have to make a choice between my life and her independence, what would you want me to do?" The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant sounds of the medical bay and the ever-present hum of the station's life support systems. When Kethral finally spoke, his voice resonated with harmonics that Maya's sensitized hearing could now partially interpret grief, gratitude, and something that might have been love. Among my people, we believe that every life is a song. My mate's song ended too soon, a melody cut short before its proper finale. For weeks, I have watched you give my daughter the chance to find her own voice, to begin her own song. That is a gift beyond measure. He paused, and one long finger pressed against the transparent wall. But I would not ask you to end your song for hers. You are not Xylophane. This is not your burden to carry unto death. What if I choose to carry it anyway? Maya heard the defiance in her own voice, the stubborn refusal to accept limitations that had defined her entire career. Kethral turned to face her fully, and Maya saw her own exhaustion reflected in his alien features. Then I would say you are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the most foolish. Perhaps both. His voice softened. But I would also say this small light is my daughter, but she is also becoming yours in ways that transcend biology. The bond you share is real, Maya. She knows your heartbeat as well as she knows her own three. If you die saving her, she will carry the weight of that sacrifice for the rest of her life. Is that the gift you want to give her? The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on keeping Small Light alive that she hadn't considered what kind of life she was giving her. A life born from death, sustained by sacrifice, shadowed by the knowledge that her existence had cost someone everything. Maya thought about her brother again, about how his death had shaped her entire existence, how she'd built her life around a void he'd left behind. Was that what she wanted for Small Light? A life haunted by guilt and debt? I don't know. Maya's voice cracked on the admission. I don't know how to let go. Every time I pull back, every time I give her space to fail, all I can feel is her fear, and my own. I'm terrified that if I disconnect too soon, she'll die, and it will be my fault for not holding on long enough. Fear of failure is not the same as knowledge of failure. Kethral's words carried a wisdom that made Maya wonder how old he was, how many losses he'd survived to speak with such certainty. You have taught Small Light to breathe, to regulate her hearts, to maintain her own warmth. These are not small things. Perhaps it is time to trust that she has learned enough. Perhaps it is time to trust yourself to know when you have given all you can give. The decision came not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow acceptance that settled over Maya like morning light. She spent the next 3 days in careful observation, watching Small Light through both the neural bridge and her own physical eyes, learning to see the infant as separate from herself. It was harder than any medical procedure she'd ever performed, this deliberate untangling of consciousness, this practice of letting go while staying present. Small Light had graduated to 5-minute intervals of independence, then 10, then 20. Each successful separation was celebrated by Kethral's harmonics and the quiet approval of the medical team, but Maya felt each one as a small death, a piece of connection lost forever. She understood now why Xylophane mothers took months to wean their children from the bond, not because the infants needed that long to learn independence, but because the mothers needed time to remember who they were without another consciousness intertwined with their own. On the 18th day, something shifted. Maya woke from a brief, restless sleep to find Small Light already awake in her pod, not in distress but in quiet contemplation. The infant's 3 eyes tracked the movement of stars visible through the medical bay's viewport, her bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that almost seemed intentional. Maya reached across the neural bridge, expecting the usual surge of need and attachment, but instead found something different: curiosity, independence, a small consciousness beginning to explore the boundaries of its own existence. "She's dreaming." Kethral's voice startled Maya. She hadn't noticed him approach, her attention so focused on the change in Small Light's mental state. Not sleeping dreams, but waking dreams. The kind where Xylophane young begin to imagine who they might become. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't have said if they were from joy or grief or exhaustion. "She's ready, isn't she? To try longer separations." "Perhaps." Kethral settled into the chair beside her, his crystalline features reflecting the soft glow of medical monitors. "Or perhaps you are ready to let her try." The distinction mattered more than Maya wanted to admit. She'd been telling herself this was about Small Light's development, about medical milestones and biological readiness. But the truth was messier, more human. Maya had gotten used to the connection, to the way it filled the emptiness she'd carried since her brother died. Being needed so completely, so desperately, had given her a purpose that went beyond professional duty. Letting go meant returning to being just Maya, just a nurse on a space station, just one small person in an infinite universe. "I'm scared." The admission came out barely above a whisper. "What if I disconnect and she's not ready? What if I've misjudged and she dies because I gave up too soon?" Dr. Morrison, who'd been monitoring from her usual station, turned to face them. "Maya, listen to me. In 18 days, you've kept a Xylophane infant alive when every piece of medical literature said it was impossible. You've created a neural bridge that shouldn't exist, sustained 2 lives with 1 mind, and taught an alien child how to survive independently. If you'd asked me 3 weeks ago if any of that was possible, I would have said you were delusional." She moved closer, her expression intense with conviction. "You haven't misjudged. You've performed a miracle, and now you need to trust that the miracle is complete enough." Complete enough. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but enough. Maya turned the phrase over in her mind, feeling its weight. Medicine was never about perfection. It was about doing the best you could with imperfect knowledge, making decisions with incomplete information, accepting that sometimes enough was the most you could hope for. "I want to try an hour." Maya's voice steadied as she spoke the decision aloud. Full disconnection. No neural bridge, no monitoring of her internal systems from my end. Just Small Light, on her own, with the medical monitors to track her. The room fell silent. An hour was longer than they'd attempted by a factor of 3. It was the difference between a practice run and a real test, between training wheels and riding free. Dr. Voss checked his tablet, reviewing Small Light's latest readouts. "Her systems are stable. All indicators suggest she can maintain autonomic function. But an hour is a long time for an infant who's never been truly alone. She won't be alone." Kethral stood, moving to his daughter's pod. "I will sing to her. The harmonics of my voice cannot replace a bond mother's connection, but they can provide comfort, can remind her that she is loved even in independence." Maya felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that this moment had been inevitable from the start. She'd always been a temporary bridge, a stopgap measure to buy time for the real relationship to develop. Small Light needed her father, needed to learn that love existed outside the neural bond, that family was more than biological connection. Okay. Maya took a deep breath, feeling it echo through Small Light's 6 lungs for what might be the last time. I'm going to tell her what's happening. Give her time to prepare. She focused her attention through the neural bridge, feeling Small Light's consciousness orient toward her like a flower, to sunlight. Over the past weeks, Maya had learned to communicate in impressions and emotions rather than words, and she used that language now to explain safety, growth, independence, return. Small Light's response was immediate fear, confusion, the desperate clinging that had defined their early connection. But underneath, Maya felt something new: trust. The infant was afraid, yes, but she trusted Maya. Trusted that Maya wouldn't abandon her, wouldn't hurt her, wouldn't let her face something she couldn't survive. That trust was almost harder to bear than the fear. I'm going to disconnect now. Maya spoke aloud for her own benefit as much as Small Light's. Your father is here. I'm here, just on the other side. You're strong enough for this, I promise. She didn't wait for a response, didn't give herself time to second guess. She reached for the neural interface at her temples and began the disconnection sequence. The separation happened in stages, layers of connection peeling away like skin from a wound. First went the autonomic monitoring. Suddenly she couldn't feel Small Light's 3 hearts, couldn't track her respiratory rate. Then the emotional connection thinned, Small Light's fear becoming distant, observable rather than lived. Finally, the last thread of consciousness unraveled, and Maya was alone in her own head for the first time in 18 days. The silence was deafening. Maya gasped, her single heart stuttering in confusion at the absence of its 3 companions. Her lungs drew breath without the echo of 6 others, and the sensation felt wrong, incomplete. She'd gotten so used to existing as a plural consciousness that being singular felt like amputation. Maya? Dr. Morrison's hand on her shoulder grounded her. How are you feeling? Strange. Maya forced herself to look at the monitors instead of retreating back across the neural bridge. Small Light's vital signs were stable, 3 hearts beating in the synchronized rhythm Maya had taught them: respiration steady, temperature normal, empty. But she's okay. She's doing okay. Kethral began to sing, and Maya watched Small Light respond to her father's voice. The infant's bioluminescence shifted colors, pulsing in patterns that seemed to echo the harmonics. She was afraid Maya could see it in the slight tremor of her limbs, the way her eyes kept darting around the pod, but she wasn't failing. She was breathing, living, surviving. The first 10 minutes crawled past like hours. Maya sat rigid in her chair, hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms, watching the monitors for any sign of destabilization. But Small Light held steady, her systems maintaining the patterns Maya had spent 18 days teaching them. At 20 minutes, Small Light's fear seemed to ease slightly. She uncurled one tiny limb, reaching toward the pod's wall where Kethral's hand was pressed against the exterior. Father and daughter couldn't touch, couldn't bond the way Small Light and Maya had, but the gesture carried its own meaning: recognition, connection, family. At 40 minutes, Maya felt her own breathing steady. Small Light was going to make it. The knowledge settled into her bones with a certainty that had nothing to do with monitors or medical data. She could feel it the way she sometimes felt the moment a fever would break, the instant a patient turned the corner from dying to recovering. Small Light had found her own strength. The hour marker arrived with a soft chime from Dr. Voss's tablet. Maya looked at the readouts one more time, seeing the steady lines that represented a life sustained by its own power rather than borrowed will. She did it. Maya's voice broke on the words. We did it. The disconnection became permanent 3 days later, though Maya stayed in the medical bay for another week, unable to fully separate herself from the small life she'd sustained. Small Light continued to thrive, her confidence growing with each day. Of independence, she began to make soft harmonics that Kethril said were the first attempts at language, the beginning of her own unique song. Maya listened to those sounds and heard both triumph and loss, the bittersweet music of a connection that had saved a life by learning to end. Dr. Morrison ran daily scans on Maya's brain, documenting the damage with clinical precision, while her eyes carried a weight of guilt that Maya wished she could ease. The hippocampal deterioration was permanent, Morrison explained, though less severe than it might have been. Maya would likely struggle with memory formation for the rest of her life, might lose chunks of time from before the connection, might always feel a lingering sense of dissociation. The amygdala damage would probably manifest as anxiety, hypervigilance, difficulty regulating emotional responses. You'll need therapy, Doctor. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. Probably for years, and you should consider a transfer to a facility with better psychiatric support than we have here. Maya nodded, accepting the words without really hearing them. She was still learning to exist in a singular consciousness, still adjusting to the silence where Small Light's presence used to hum. The idea of leaving the station, of never seeing Small Light again, felt like a second amputation, but she understood the medical logic. She'd broken something in herself to save the infant, and now she needed to figure out how to live with the pieces that remained. Kethril found her on her last night on the station, sitting in the observation room he'd claimed as his own during those desperate weeks. Small Light was asleep in her pod, her bioluminescence dimmed to a soft glow that pulsed with the rhythm of dreams. She was being transferred to a xylophone medical facility in 2 days, where specialists in her species' unique biology could monitor her development and ensure she continued to thrive. I wanted to thank you, Kethril's voice carried harmonics that Maya's damaged neural pathways could no longer fully interpret, but she caught the emotional weight beneath the words. And to give you something, if you will accept it. He held out a small crystalline structure, similar to the ones he'd arranged around the observation room but more intricate, more personal. It caught the light and refracted it in patterns that seemed to shift and change as Maya looked at it. Among my people, when someone saves a child's life, they become part of that child's song forever. Their name is sung in our histories, woven into the family story across generations. Kethril pressed the crystal into Maya's hand, and she felt warmth radiate from it, as if it held a fragment of living light. This is a memory crystal. It holds recordings of Small Light's first sounds, her first independent heartbeats. When she is grown, when she sings her own children into existence, your name will be part of that song. You will be remembered, Maya Chen, always. Maya closed her fingers around the crystal, feeling tears track down her cheeks. She'd spent 18 days learning to let go, but she hadn't realized until this moment how much she'd needed to know that the letting go mattered, that the connection would persist even in absence. Will you tell her about me? Maya's voice came out rough with emotion. When she's old enough to understand. Every day. Kethril's promise resonated with the weight of an oath. I will tell her about the human nurse who refused to accept impossible, who gave pieces of her own mind to teach my daughter how to survive. I will tell her about the 18 days when she had two parents, one who gave her life and one who taught her how to live it. The words settled around Maya like a benediction, and for the first time since the disconnection, she felt something that might have been peace. She hadn't failed. Small Light would live, would grow, would sing her own song into the universe. And Maya would carry the memory of that shared consciousness, that brief and terrible and beautiful intimacy, for whatever remained of her fractured mind's ability to remember. They sat together in the observation room until Small Light woke, watching the infant stretch and yawn and reach for the pod's walls with growing coordination. Maya felt the phantom echo of those movements, her own nervous system still remembering what it felt like to have 3 hearts and 6 lungs. Dr. Morrison said those phantom sensations would fade with time, but Maya wasn't sure she wanted them to. They were proof that the connection had been real, that for 18 days she'd been more than herself. When Maya finally left the observation room, she found Dr. Voss and Dr. Morrison waiting in the corridor. They'd arranged a small gathering in the medical bay, the entire staff who'd worked on Small Light's case, along with a handful of other station personnel who'd heard about the impossible thing that had happened in Trauma Bay 7. We wanted to say goodbye properly. Dr. Voss handed Maya a data pad displaying a commendation letter signed by the station administrator and a dozen medical review boards. What you did here will change xenomedicine forever. We're already seeing requests from other species about neural bridge protocols, about the possibility of cross-species life support. You've opened a door that everyone thought was locked. Maya looked at the commendation, at the formal language praising her innovation and courage and sacrifice. It felt distant, like a story about someone else. But when she looked up and saw the faces around her colleagues who'd supported her through those desperate weeks, who'd believed in her, even when the odds were impossible, she felt the weight of what they'd accomplished together. I couldn't have done it without all of you. Maya's voice carried to every corner of the medical bay. Dr. Morrison, you kept me alive when I was too focused on a Small Light to care about my own body. Dr. Voss, you believed in a discredited research paper and built the interface that made the connection possible. Everyone in this room contributed to saving that baby's life. This isn't my victory. It's ours. The gathering dissolved into conversations and embraces, medical professionals who'd shared an experience that transcended normal station life. Maya moved through them in a daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes while her mind kept drifting back to the observation room, to Small Light's sleeping form and Kethral's vigil. Later, alone in her quarters as she packed for the transfer shuttle that would arrive in the morning, Maya pulled out the memory crystal Kethral had given her. She held it up to the light, watching the patterns shift and reform, and activated its holographic display. Small Light's first independent sounds filled the small space, uncertain harmonics that wavered and broke before finding their rhythm. Maya listened to the infant's voice learning its own strength, and she heard her brother's last breath in the pauses between notes, heard her grandmother's final words in the wavering tones. She heard every goodbye she'd ever survived, and every hello that had made the surviving worth it. The crystal's recording ended, but Maya kept holding it, feeling its warmth against her palm. She thought about the life ahead of her, therapy and memory problems and anxiety that would probably never fully resolve. She thought about the career she'd sacrificed, the brain damage that would limit her abilities, the nights she'd wake up feeling phantom heartbeats that weren't her own. And she thought about Small Light, alive and dreaming and growing stronger every day. About a tiny alien infant who would carry Maya's name in her song, who would tell her own children someday about the human who'd refused to give up. Maya had spent her entire life trying to outrun the helplessness she'd felt watching her brother die. She'd built a career around the desperate need to save everyone, to never feel that powerless again. But sitting in her quarters with a memory crystal warming her palm, she finally understood something she'd been too afraid to see before. Some battles you won by refusing to surrender. Some victories came from holding on when every rational voice said to let go. And some connections, brief as they were, changed you so fundamentally that even when they ended, you carried them forward as part of who you'd become. Maya Chen had given 18 days and pieces of her mind to save one small life. The doctors had said it was impossible, that the alien baby would die, that no human could sustain a xylophone infant through neural connection alone. They'd been wrong. And in proving them wrong, Maya had discovered that the most impossible thing wasn't the medical miracle, or the neural bridge, or the biological compatibility that shouldn't have existed. The most impossible thing was learning that sometimes saving a life meant accepting that you couldn't save it forever. That love, real love, the kind that mattered, was knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Small Light would live. Maya would remember, for as long as her damaged brain allowed. And somewhere in the space between those two truths, in the gap between connection and separation, Maya had finally found the peace that had eluded her since she was 7 years old and helpless. She wasn't helpless anymore. She never had been. She'd just been learning, one impossible patient at a time, that courage wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about feeling the fear and choosing to try anyway. Maya set the memory crystal carefully in her bag, turned off the lights in her quarters, and allowed herself to sleep. And for the first time in 18 days, she dreamed in singular consciousness her own heartbeat, her own breath, her own small and precious and sufficient life. Tomorrow she would leave the station. Next week she would start therapy. Next month she would figure out what kind of nurse she could be with a fractured memory and phantom sensations of hearts she no longer shared. But tonight she rested. And that was enough.